My name is Noelle Jones. I have the pleasure of serving as the co-VP of programming for the AMA Atlanta chapter. And we're just excited about this super relevant conversation. And we're so excited to talk with our moderator and the brand leaders and representatives that we have a part of this awesome panel. Today, we're going to talk about where brands stand and where do they go in 2022 and beyond, really forward thinking about what the future looks like. We are going to learn from some of the brand leaders who are our panelists, who are still building and explore how to really authentically integrate DEI into your brand's DNA and in a way that is here to stay. So thank you again for joining. We also want to give a huge shout out and thanks to all of our sponsors at every level, Diamond, Bronze, Event, and the Scholarship Program. For more information about how you can sponsor, you'll see you can contact Guy Powell at sponsorships@amaatlanta.com. So thank you again to our awesome event sponsors. So I have the pleasure of introducing our awesome moderator for today's event, Roy Broderick Jr. Welcome, Roy, if you want to come on camera. So Roy is a connector of community, culture, and creativity who leads as the CEO of Authentique Agency, a full-service marketing agency designed to blend two of his greatest passions, positioning the LGBTQ and multicultural audiences as integral components of a brand's marketing strategy. Roy has worked with notable brands across industries like Target, Papa John's, AT&T, and many more. Additionally, Roy serves as the AMA Atlanta chapter. He serves the AMA Atlanta chapter as VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So please welcome our moderator for today, Roy Broderick Jr., and he will also introduce our esteemed panelists today.
Thank you so much, Noelle, for the great introduction and honestly partnership with your committee in planning this event. Thank you. Teamwork makes the dream work. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for what will be an amazing discussion. I have the pleasure of moderating this great discussion between two of my favorite leaders that sit here in my hometown, Atlanta, Georgia. First up, well, as a reminder to everyone first, we will have Q&A available at the end of the panel. So please utilize the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom platform to be able to ask any questions you might have. And we'll definitely get to those throughout our discussion. So first up, Ms. Daphne Hoyt Dickerson. Daphne is the head of external brand and business communications for the Coca-Cola Company, North America Operating Unit. Daphne oversees external brand communications for the 30+ brands in the North America Operating Unit's $12.5 billion portfolio, including iconic and beloved brands such as Coke, Sprite, Smartwater, and AHA. Daphne is also responsible for oversight of the North America Operating Unit's business-related communications for sports, sponsorship, and entertainment assets. She has spent more than 20 years delivering award-winning campaigns, crafting innovative communication strategies, and managing corporate communication efforts at global communication firms where she's held roles of increasing responsibility. Let's welcome Daphne Hoyt Dickerson. Next up, we have Mrs. Dwayna Haley. For over 15 years, Dwayna has led public relations and marketing campaigns for Fortune 500 brands. As Chief Brand and Communications Officer for Metro Atlanta Chamber, she is the face and visionary for MAC's strategic focus on promoting Atlanta and is responsible for stewarding MAC's brands, including Choose ATL, the talent attraction and acquisition initiative created to foster community, culture, and career development for millennial and Gen Z professionals. She was inducted into the 2018 class of PR's Weeks 40 Under 40, the 2019 inaugural class of PRSA's Georgia 40 Under 40, and her alma mater's Hall of Fame within the College of Media and Entertainment. Please welcome Ms. Dwayna Haley. So first, happy Tuesday. We all had turkey and dressing and all those things last week. So we're coming out of food coma and having a great discussion today. Just ground rules. I like to start with this first, in creating a safe space so we can share great info and trust each other while we aren't all in the same room. We still sense a sense of community as marketing and communication professionals. Guest audience, please feel free to type your questions in. No question is a dumb question. We really want to make sure, as we have these senior amazing leaders with us, that you can ask anything you might be curious about. So let's kick it off. So first, Daphne and Dwayna, this question's for you both. How has your organization's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion evolved between 2020, the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, and now?
I can kick things off. Then I'll hand it over to my friend Dwayna. And thanks so much, Roy, and thanks AMA. Look forward to today's conversation. So great question. I think it's important to acknowledge I'm new in role. So I started at Coca-Cola at the top of this year. So I missed 2020 and kind of all that it brought to the organization. Of course, I, like others, read what was going on amongst many of the top organizations around the world, particularly those in the hometown that I live in Atlanta. What I can tell you is that Coke has had a long history when it comes to DE&I. This is not new to us. And it starts back from the 20s and 30s. But one thing that, has stood out, I think, is our work with even MLK Jr., something that we're really proud of. Hank Aaron, we just have long histories, and you can go, this is something that is on our website. You can go to World of Coke. You can kind of go through the chronicles with us as it relates to DE&I and the importance of diversity, and not just diversity of race, culture, women, able-bodiedness, you name it. What I can say is that for Coca-Cola, what we try to do is really bring out our purpose in everything that we do. And so when we look at kind of what happened in 2020, it was an opportunity for the company and for specific brands to really rally behind the causes that were at front and center. We could not ignore it, right? And so whether it was the dinner conversations that we had around Together We Must, or whether it was kind of how we showed up for our internal associates, bringing them opportunities to voice their concerns. We have really active inclusion networks who were counseled, and they provided statements, and we gave space for people to, through our internal kind of news center, to kind of voice their opinion. We were all about the conversation. And that's one of the things that I think that we did really well. Brands like Sprite spoke up because Sprite is unapologetically diverse and unapologetically Black as well, particularly for young Black youth, really driving home points around voter education and around, community kind of coming together. Other smaller brands like Peace Tea even drove voter education campaigns. So our brands kind of tipped in the conversation. We're correct. But as a company, we had a point of view. We stood behind, what we like to say is being on the right side of history. We have been doing that for so many years. That is kind of like who we are known to be within Atlanta and in the South and Georgia. And I don't think that the moment of 2020 changed that. But as we look to kind of forward thinking where we are right now in 2021 and where we want to be, I think the word that I would kind of use right now is progress, right? So it's about what is the progress that we're making? How are we holding ourselves accountable? And how do we continue to move forward? And I think that that's what we really are trying to uncover, as everybody experienced, all of the social kind of reckoning came at the time where we were also going through a pandemic. For Coca-Cola, we also went through the largest business transformation in our 135 years. What that meant is that for everything that, internally we knew about Coca-Cola, it changed. And so with all of that change internally, it also kind of helped, potentially there was an upset in the apple cart moment because things that would press forward kind of came to a stop. So if we look at 2021, what we tried to do through a couple of things, there's now a dedicated multicultural strategist as a Black man who's really helping bring together some of the greatness that has happened in 2020 and prior, and then setting us on a path forward for where we want to go in 2022 and beyond. We also kind of announced a dedicated effort directly towards minority-owned media companies and doubling our spend with them. So a ton of research was done to ensure that we knew who we were talking to, how we needed to talk to them, and really not make assumptions about who our consumer is and how they like to be reached. So we're doing the work. I mean, I think that that's part of it, talk the talk and walk the walk, right? But also some of this, again, is going back to that word progress, is really defining what progress is and sticking to it. And I'm sure we'll get into other couple of things with the questions that we have, but I'll turn it over to Dwayna.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, hey, Daph. So I also am new in my role. I am a little over 100 days in. And so when the social reckoning and the rising of things happened, with 2020, I wasn't here. But I will say that my predecessor, Deisha Barnett, did a fantastic job of launching the ATL Action for Racial Equity, which is a series of handbooks and playbooks that we have published to help companies to learn and educate themselves on best practices in DE&I, with workforce management, with a lot of different topics. And so that was something that sort of set the groundwork. I'll also say that Deisha previously, as Chief Brand and Communications Officer, also held the title of Head of DE&I. And one thing that happened when she left, which I think she also helped to spearhead, is to separate that from this role. There needed to be intention behind it. There needed to be someone who was solely focused on it. And so the chamber has, decided, we have placed Michael Baptiste, who is our VP of DE&I, to have dedicated focus to our external convening of all the things that we're doing. I wouldn't say that the chamber probably historically is known as a driver of, DE&I efforts. However, we are a civic organization, and we have been for 162 years involved in a lot of progress and change in the state of Georgia. I think that over the last 2 years, there's been a more concentrated and dedicated effort to it. And I'm really excited about Raphael Bostic, who is the president and CEO of Atlanta Federal Reserve, that is coming in as the chair of our board, that is also deeply passionate about it. So we are bringing in very integral people that are going to help us to make sure that the moral and business imperative of it is prioritized. We've also done work post the rising and reckoning of everything that happened with Ahmaud Arbery to repeal the citizens arrest law and to pass the Georgia hate crimes legislation. So there's definitely work that is being done in our organization. For me, it is something that I am deeply passionate about. So I'm aligned with Michael Baptiste to, be his soldier in the field and make sure that our marketing and communications efforts always keeps that in mind. So I'm excited about what we are planning for the future. I'm excited about all the new voices that we're bringing in that are going to help us as an organization to make sure, as Daphne said, we stand on the right side of history with this issue and with this topic.
Awesome. No, and I think what's really important to highlight for our audience is that you all are putting in the work, right? You are doing research, you are benchmarking, right? But you're also being realistic about what your goals and progress can look like for an organization. I find a lot of times folks want to just be reactive, right? And say, oh, this happened, we got to say something, or we got to do something, and really taking that time to put your money where your mouth is, whether that's with talent, whether that's with understanding that, the work is so important, so it requires another senior thinker in the role, and then giving them budget and resources to be able to make sure that they are staffed appropriately. So as we look ahead to 2022, I mean, I can't believe it's almost here, right? And we've had quite a couple years, right? What I would say is, what considerations or new DEI integrations, what do you have on your plate that you're like, we're definitely going to take this into 2022 as you further evolve marketing strategies? Because we know that, comms, right? Both of you have a comms background, and that intersects with marketing. And then there's this DE&I piece, and depending on where you are in the company, what is that layered? And then there's multicultural marketing. So for our audience, like, what can they see or learn from you immediately that you're going to take into your 2022 plans?
So I'll say that a couple of things that are priorities for us in 2022. One is the evolution of the ATL Action for Racial Equity playbooks. We are surveying over 240 companies, and we'll be doing so over the next year and a half in order to pull in best practices that we can publish that actually will move the needle in DE&I, and making sure that companies in the state are not aligning to vanity metrics, the things that sound good but are really meretricious, that really hold no true value. So what we want to do is make sure that we take the foundation of what we've done and evolve that into, okay, now how can you move? How can you act? How can you make sure that your cultures are not just diverse from, say, women, or, just not just from diverse from, the easy metrics to hit, but also that you have an equitable and inclusive environment, and really pushing and challenging them to make sure that that's happening around the state. So that's one. The other thing is making sure that, again, we align with Mr. Bostic, Dr. Bostic, and his passion and vision around financial equality and financial literacy and entrepreneurship, and and those things, which I think is going to be really exciting for us as a region to really bring the financial view into the purview of things. The other thing is, one of the really important goals and metrics for our policy team is to continue to advocate and lobby against discriminatory legislation in the state. And so taking a hardcore look at the laws and legislations in the state of Georgia, and looking at what are those things that we proactively need to address, especially as legislative session is coming up. We look at the fact that, yes, we worked on the, repealing the citizens arrest law and that Georgia hate crime, but that came after Ahmaud was murdered. And so what we realize is that's very sobering to think that something that critical had to happen in order for us to take a proactive look. And so our team is making sure that we look at, okay, well, let's dig a little deeper. Let's be proactive in bringing up these topics to make sure that we are addressing them before we have another casualty in our culture. So those are the top things that come to mind. Beyond that, of course, I am a Black woman. I am now Chief Brand and Communications Officer. So all things Black and culture, Black and brown culture, LGBTQ plus community, I am really, really bullish about making sure that there is an authentic connection to the culture, making sure that we are telling those stories, and making sure that we are amplifying the executives and the rising senior executives in each one of our companies, so that we can continue to build upon our civil rights legacy here in Atlanta and show the beautiful diversity that we have here in the region. So those are all things that I'm really excited for us to tackle in 2022.
Awesome.
Well, from Coca-Cola standpoint, I think it depends on who you're talking about as far as what our objectives are. When we look into 2022, I don't know if anybody knows our Chief Diversity Officer, Lori Billingsley. She's incredible. And if she was here, she would probably tell you about all the things that we have in progress. Her team is a masterful team because she's representing Coca-Cola across the entire globe. Not a small feat. From my lens, and I look at North America, right? And so some of what I want to bring it down to the real world, like I'm trying to make some difference here and make impact, right? And Dwayna really touched on a lot of the work that we try to do, and that's like tipping into culture, really making ourselves relevant. We have a hurdle up against us at Coca-Cola. Yes, we are a kind of brand because everybody knows, like if you see a red Coke with like this white swoosh, red color can with a white swoosh, it's probably Coca-Cola, right? Just like with the green, you kind of know it's Sprite. And that's the good news, but also we're a target for a lot. So when we think about kind of like what looks forward, what does forward look in 2022, we have to be very thoughtful across a number of different things. One thing that I know that is a focus for my organization is really our storytelling when it comes to DE&I. Historically, the Coca-Cola Company really takes a very conservative approach to storytelling. That's just what we do. And that doesn't mean that we don't have amazing stories. We do. It's just the approach in which we've taken over the years. And so part of the change that is happening, everybody's going through this amazing shift right now. It's really incredible to watch and see and be in the shoes that I'm in right now and in this space. But part of that is really opening it up and figuring out how we get comfortable with talking about some of the work that we're doing internally and externally. So internally, some of the work is really around setting standards and setting opportunities for us to communicate about how we will be mirroring our internal workforce as our surroundings, right? So we live in the city of Atlanta. We're headquartered in Atlanta. So we need a workforce that's balanced, right? So that the Black and brown people are representative, not just at, kind of like the lower levels, but all throughout the organizations, in middle management and senior level positions. We're really lucky. Valerie Love, Melanie Bolden, Lori Billingsley, like we have some great names in leadership, Jamil Hester. We don't lack, but there's always opportunity. Like Dwayna, I'm a Black woman. I'm rooting for everybody, Black and brown, just how it is. And it's great in that way, because we have to have people who are champions, and we have to have people who are in positions where you could potentially see yourself there, right? So some of that is like being really prescriptive and doggish around us trying to put ourselves out there and commit to the goal and hold ourselves accountable to it, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is a really significant focus on HBCUs. Again, another place, long-term commitment that we've had with HBCUs, but what a rich resource. I myself am a product of an HBCU, go Spelman. And so when we think about our partnerships with HBCUs, for us, it's really not just limited to what I think people see us. I mean, obviously we're a beverage company, so we've been on the sidelines. We have waters, we have a Powerade. I don't know if you guys read about this. We have Body Armor now. So lots of brands to talk about, but really what's most important are kind of the student athletes and the athletic piece. The educational piece of this. What an opportunity that HBCUs, yes, go Jaguars. What an opportunity HBCUs provide our community. And that's really what Coca-Cola now is looking at and trying to figure out how to optimize and really make sure that there is intention, again, with what we do and how we do this, whether it is through opportunities on campus, scholarships otherwise, or we're talking about recruitment efforts, right? So making sure that Coca-Cola shows up in a big way. We have bottlers, we have, our organization. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And that's one thing. The other thing is, you have to hold yourself accountable when you're in these large organizations. So keeping your stuff tight and keeping people around you who will call you on your stuff is really important. So again, our inclusion networks, right now our Black Inclusion Network is led by somebody on my team who is incredible. Her name is Alex Ebanks. If you guys don't know her, look her up. She's incredible. And, I offer that to say is that I think she might be the youngest lead of an inclusion network that we've ever had. But that's the type of kind of radical thinking that I really love that Coca-Cola is bringing to the table. The fact that we have these types of people with strengths and who are connected and who can have vision, and we can put that vision into play. And we also can hold ourselves accountable around what is happening and what isn't happening. So 2022, I'm gonna go back to my buzzword, progress. Right.
No, it works. It works. And I kudos to Alex, great friend of mine. But I'm not surprised to hear that. I think if we take a step back, Dwayna and Daphne, and say, for brands that are just starting to figure out what DE&I means to them, or just starting to kind of get their feet wet, right? As it relates to marketing, what advice would you have for them about the resources they should and can reference? What would you say should be a first step as they start to make progress? I will be biased as an agency owner and say, pull in a resource that knows, right, to help you so that you're not tone deaf or uneducated, and that you have a true 360 view of what's happening in your organization. But what would you all say?
My initial reaction is just really being so super clear about your purpose. Like, who are you? What do you stand for? If you don't have that, then the rest of it just doesn't work. Right. And so for me, I think that it's really clear around Coca-Cola and what our purpose is. Pressure testing that, though, through the lens of North America, I think sometimes it takes us some work because, listen, we're a very large organization. So Coca-Cola, the company's purpose, very clear, make a difference, refresh the world. Yes. But what does that mean in North America? We're a very different market than Latin America or Asia. So some of that is being really clear about your purpose, who you stand for, who stands by you, what you want to achieve is so critically important. That's the hard work, right? And the other piece of it is the audience. And for, you know, and Dwayne, we talked about this yesterday when we did a little bit of a pre-briefing. We talked about this in audience. Understanding your audience is so key. And probably one of the biggest hurdles when I got into Coca-Cola is I just thought like, oh, okay, consumers, so customers and our internal associates. Wrong. Coca-Cola is such a networked organization. We have bottlers, we have customers, obviously we have government officials. I mean, we have to keep a lot of people happy. So going back to my comment around purpose starts shifting. If you're not real clear, purpose starts shifting if you're trying to over-index in one audience versus the other. So it is really knowing who within your organization can help you. And this is like pulling in kind of like, who are the assets? Who knows? Is it an agency? Is it people within your organization? But understanding your audiences and which audience, I mean, there has to be an audience that is more important than the other. I hate to say it, but y'all, it's true. So there is this hierarchy within the audience, and you have to be very clear, or you have to be clear of which message which audience gets, right? And so some of this is just tricky work. It is uncomfortable work. A lot of people don't want to do the hard work that takes, you know, I'm right now going through an exercise where I'm having to like knock down on doors and be like, my agency needs to talk to you about DE&I. Can you make yourself available? And everybody doesn't want to do the work. A, it's hard, but B, it's also uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable to honor whether we did the work or we didn't, right? But so some of this is just seriously being very clear with the purpose, firmly putting yourself, feet planted on the ground, true to yourself. There are so many brands that we could name. Nike, you know, they don't move. There are many different brands that have decided to like say, this is who we are. We're not moving. Ben and Jerry's, right? And no matter what happens, they don't move. The rest of us, we shift sometimes depending upon, you know, the feedback that we get. And with, you know, we all talk about it, we're in communications, right? Like, so the blend between, you know, earned media and social and digital, it's all very gray right now. And so anybody is an author. Anybody has something to say, and it makes it dangerous environment for us who, you know, work with narratives and do storytelling, because for most of what I do, right, is really more crisis communication or reacting to, I mean, like, am I telling the truth or what?
Yep.
Especially when you're talking about diversity issues and multicultural issues and things, and social justice and racial justice and inequities. So firmly planting your feet on the ground around your purpose and sticking to it, despite, you know, the winds, the headwinds.
Absolutely.
And then understanding your audiences would be my two things.
Absolutely. So Dwayne, I'm going to let you answer this next one because I know you can, and it builds on what Daphne just mentioned about audience segments, right? So when you think about, you know, since 2022, and even in your role, you know, while you're over a little bit over 100 days in, you know, what are the new audience segments that you plan to tap into 2022? Because, you know, when you have to test messaging, or you have to say, you know, hey, we've learned from, you know, our approach before, you know, so what's the new audience research we're going to do? Talk a little bit about that, because I think, you know, as we look at millennials, but getting millennials out of the door, really Gen Zers and Gen Alpha, you know, intersectionality is real. A lot of brands aren't ready to have that conversation, right? And so when you really think about Atlanta, even a talent and from talent acquisition and attraction standpoint, I'm sure there are a lot of different audiences you have to serve.
There absolutely are. I think, so Choose ATL as a brand has always targeted, since its launch in 2015, it has always targeted Gen Z and millennial talent, Gen Z and millennial professionals. And that's great in one respect, because of the fact that partial of millennial and a lot of Gen Z is, you know, being called the woke generation. So it's really, really easy to pressure test things with them. What's hard is getting their attention, because in the span of a day, all of the white noise that is around that's pulling amongst their, you know, average of 4 devices that they're carrying at any one time, it's hard to get the focus to see, like, does this matter or does this matter? Now, when they do focus, they are very clear, and they will build you up or they will shut you down, which is, you know, the whole cancel culture movement that we're all in the midst of. I think that, you know, we have a really, really talented economist and research department here that is helping us do exactly what you're talking about, which is, first, like Daphne said, aligning to our purpose. Exactly what is that? Considering where we sit as an organization, being one of, if I don't mind saying, the most powerful chamber organizations in the state. No disrespect to anyone else, but our board speaks for itself. And at the end of the day, there is absolutely a hierarchy of stakeholders, from our board to our advisory committee to then our civic leaders, our religious leaders, and then the audiences that we speak to from a marketing and comms perspective within the Choose brand, which is Gen Z and millennial. And so I think that we are trying to figure out what is a priority for those audiences? What's keeping them up at night? What are the issues and topics that they have a tendency to double down on and pay attention to that will trend for them more often than not? Because we know there are general topics that, we could jump into. Black Lives Matter. Okay, that's an ocean to boil. Can we condense that down into what about our lives are you feeling are not matter? Is that a judicial system issue? Is that a, whatever? So we're trying to make sure that we get very clear as we align to our purpose, also getting clear as to what are the priorities that our audiences are particularly interested in and particularly passionate about. And conversely, those that they are shying away from. What are the ones that you are, not so comfortable diving into? And it may be because there may be skeletons there that you as an organization or a person or whatever are not ready to confront. But at any rate, we need to get underneath it. There's no way that we are going to create balance and equality and really push the extremes towards equality if we don't get at the things that we're happy to talk about and comfortable to talk about, or the things that we're not. And my favorite saying is, there is no comfort in growth and no growth in comfort. DE&I sits at the epicenter of that statement. If you don't get uncomfortable, there's not going to be any change within this discipline. Like it just is what it is. So we absolutely have to message. We are also aligning with our agency teams to help us to round out, the awareness to what questions should we be asking? Because sometimes and then you don't know what you don't know. So you need to make sure that there is diversity of perspective, even within your approach, to figure out whatever the solution, answer, or strategy is. So it's a major complex thing, but research, insights, audience understanding, and priority is absolutely at the center of making sure that you can have and make substantive difference within this. Anyone can talk about anything. Anybody can, decide, oh, okay, this is a part of our priorities, and talk about it. But I want for us as the chamber to be about it. I want us to do things that are going to have substantive impact. Given our position in the state, we absolutely can shift narratives. We can shift behavior. And that's a really, really important, and for me, it's a very heavy responsibility. And so I want to make sure that we get it right. So yes, audience testing, message testing, making sure that we have a diversity of perspective around us so that we're addressing and prioritizing the right things, our stakeholder engagement, all of it is a part of the formula and the mix to figure out, what direction we're taking, what journey we're going to be on.
Awesome, thank you. So, and this can go to both of you, how can brand leaders retool and arm their teams to lead with and integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion in marketing strategies, right? To every campaign, whether it's the campaign's approach, the overall strategy, and even the conversation. I'm gonna add another layer to it and ask about accountability. If you can just share with us, how do you all keep your internal colleagues on track? What are those tactical things you might have implemented or started to make sure they're thinking the right way? So anyone that wants to start with that one, but I want our audience to have some things to take back to be able to understand, no matter where they are in their journey, what are some golden nuggets that they can implement at their organizations?
It really is, for me, about education. I really have found that a lot of times when you're not aware of something or educated on a topic, then you have a tendency not to even think about it. There's no necessarily bias there. It's just not top of mind for you, especially if you are a white person and you have privilege and you never had to approach something like this or think about it in your daily. And so for me, especially within my previous role at Porter Novelli, it was really important that education was always there. We were always having trainings. We always had people coming in for lunch and learns to speak to us and help us to understand. I remember we had an actual, I won't call them out, but I'll say quick service restaurant client that the majority of their audience, Black and brown people, and yet that was the least of their budget in marketing. Their multicultural marketing budget was the smallest of their marketing budget. And yet the audience, and so it was like, wait, we don't understand that. It was like, oh, well, you know, they had their thinking behind it, but in the end, it didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And so you have to be able to, one, educate the people around you, and then call it out for what it is. At the end of the day, you know, we can't tiptoe around these topics. You know, they're going to be hard. They're going to be tough. Discourse can happen with respect. But I educate my teams. I keep it constant in the forefront of their minds that in everything that we do, we need to be thinking about the people that we serve. And those people are many different shades, and they come from many different walks of life. And we need to make sure that, you know, representation matters, that when they hear from us, they feel a sense of themselves, that they must have thought about me, or they must have thought about where I've come from or what I've done. That is how you create true behavior change in communications and marketing. If you can, in fact, tap into the realities of and the truths of your audience, then you can sway and move them however you need to. But you have to be educated to do that. You have to be informed. And so it is a constant, like every month we're doing something, we're going somewhere, we're bringing someone in. It is a constant. And I have found that the more you do that, then it becomes routine. It becomes learned behavior. And then you don't even have to prompt someone to think, okay, where's the diversity in this? Because it begins to be displayed throughout their work, throughout their writing, throughout their social content. And then you know that you're moving the needle.
Thank you. Daphne, what you got for us?
So, I mean, well, Dwayna said it all. I mean, yes, my friend, yes. I'll just kind of round out with a couple of things. Number one is when you are a people manager and a people leader, you have control, because then that means that you can make decisions on who you hire or who you recommend within the organization. So you can bring those people with diverse talents, you know, into the organization. And so it goes to the point that Dwayna was saying, some of this really starts and ends with the people that you have. So people who are doing the work, the people who are controlling the budgets, and the people who are in leadership, right? And so some of it none of us can control. I am very fortunate that the president of North America happens to be Hispanic. The head of our marketing organization happens to be a Black woman. I mean, there are all these things that happen within the organization, which allows us to have a different lens in some of the work. But, you know, at the end of the day, every one of us is working within pressures of, you know, the business world, right? It's like the bottom line, and we have to be smart about that. So having people around you who are aware and who are learned and get it is important. Bringing that outside in, as Dwayna said, critically important. I have several people on my team who are so good at it. So that keeps you honest and that keeps you accurate, right? So that honesty piece is like, figure out how to get somebody who can help do that. So if you don't have the resources within your organization, that's when your agency partner comes in. Also, we're fortunate in that part of what we have to do as a brand is kind of like borrow equity within our partners. So whether it's a Hispanic organization, it could be a media platform, it could just be like, you know, Univision, Telemundo, it could be Essence, Ebony, you know, it doesn't really matter. For us, we have to develop partnerships because that's an extension of our brand work, right? In communities and with people. So that also keeps us honest and it keeps us active in places and communities. And so if my recommendation is that if there's a new partner, or if there's a new organization, or if you want to explore an organization, do the work, don't mute your voice, and figure out how to communicate it so that there is an opportunity to evaluate all of, you know, the ecosystem, not just like the Gen Pop ecosystem. And I mean, I think that those are kind of like the highlights. I mean, so, again, I do though think some of this goes back to the people that we have around us. I think we all have been there in circumstances in which you've been the only in the room, and it's really hard for your voice to get heard. And so you have to be really strategic when and how to use your voice. There are some of those, Dwayna mentioned Disha, who's one of the most masterful that I've ever seen. Like, she doesn't care. She's telling you exactly how she feels at any moment of the day. And I think it works for her because she's earned the right. You have to figure out individually how you earn the right within your organization, within your craft, within your field. Make sure you're knowledgeable. So when somebody starts to poke at it, you're like, oh, absolutely not. I got all this data right here, backs me right on up why we should be going this way versus that way. So that's what I'll just go back to the people and being educated, as Dwayna said, and kind of bringing that outside in.
No, I love that. Thank you. And one thing to point out, we chatted about this yesterday. Like, I can remember in my younger agency days, when there would be an RFP for an LGBT campaign, and they'd be like, well, we know Roy's gay, so Roy, come work on this.
Sure.
And I'd be like, I am not the segment. Like, yes, I am of the community, but I'm not the segment. So I think also understanding, when you do sit in different pockets with your identity, understanding that that doesn't necessarily make you the expert. And so being open to that no matter where you are, because when you are that token one, it's heavy to speak for the community, right? Yeah. At any point. And so it's really great to hear you say, really, but when you can, using data, not just your opinion, your own circumstance or experience with something. So great point. So we're going to go a little bit deeper before we open up for Q&A. I'd love to talk about, ways that you have been able to keep your organization authentic, but still transformative, right? More conscious and inclusive. So, we just came out where every brand under the sun had to respond to the verdict for Ahmaud Arbery. And I know all communications folks hated that day, because sometimes you're at that glass ceiling between how I really feel and then what either my client or my boss feels, or if this is going to make them comfortable or uncomfortable, or snowball into something bigger and point out that we haven't been doing what we said we were going to do. So let's kind of have an honesty moment, and let's hear how that went for you all, if you can share.
Well, you're going to hear something totally different from me than you will from Dwayna. So I'll just go ahead and start. Coca-Cola didn't have a statement. That was intentional. So, and, it goes back to what I said before. We have a lot of stakeholders that we have to balance, and we have to figure out the best way for us to tip into conversations. We didn't tip into conversations around Kyle Rittenhouse. We didn't tip into this conversation around Ahmaud. Now, internally, we prepared. We listened on social media. We prepared statements. If I'm being very, very transparent with this group of 37 fast friends here, it probably wasn't all that I would want it to be, but also I'm not the number one person who's approving all of the internal language. Because for us, when we make a statement, the world listens. It's not just, the state of Georgia, it's not just the US, it is the entire world. And we have, like I mentioned, bottlers in every country. In this country, in the US, we have 67. We have customers in every country, and we have to strike a balance. We do. It's business. And so that's the tough work, y'all. That's the not so pretty work that people don't like to talk about. And it is, I could give you countless examples right now where I was faced with not just these incidents, and this was a minor one. It's like, at least we were prepared. We had a point of view. I think everybody rallied around it, but we also knew there were things that we couldn't say right now because we have had a rough year. Google us. 2021 has not been fun for Coca-Cola. We have had 2 major incidents that have really shook us to the core, and we've learned some hard lessons as a result of them. We also are doing everything in our power to figure out how to right-size some things that we got wrong. And that's going back to that word. I know I'm tired. I know you might be tired of it, but the progress piece, it's like you want to continue moving forward. You are going to take some steps back, but you want to be moving forward, and you want the people around you in leadership positions to support the efforts to move forward. And if there's a cause that you think that we need to rally behind, find the right people who can support you in your efforts. Sometimes it starts as a low, buzz. And yes, it'll be like a gnat that's kind of annoying. But again, when you put the data behind it, when you get more people to create advocacy for something, you can build a movement within your organization so that change can actually happen. So I'll say that. The other thing that I'll say is that You know, I have the very fun job of reading probably 50 to 60% of the personal letters that are written to James Quincy, our global CEO, and Alfredo Rivera, our North America president. They're amusing sometimes. Sometimes they're in form of haikus. Sometimes they have bullets. Sometimes they have pictures. I know all the things. People hate us. They love us. They hate us. They love us. But the reason that I do share is that a lot of times when we wade into conversations, people often throw it back in our face. We get it a lot on social media, but the letters themselves, the emails that we get are particularly special. And it's not fun. But, you know, work for a company that you ultimately can believe in. That's what I'm going to say. That ultimately, you know, not everything is going to be right, but you believe that the way that people are treated internally, the way that we treat our customers, the way that we treat our partners, the way that we look at our vendors, the way that we behave is exemplary, or that there is the potential based off of the people who will be within your organization at some point in time for things to change. If you don't have that, then you should rethink kind of like where you are. And I'll leave you with that.
Drops mic. Dwayna, what you got for us?
Yeah. Wednesday was hard. It was hard. And I actually tweeted that morning that, you know, my heart and prayers and thoughts were with particularly Black professionals who were standing in the trenches of having to create a statement in response to the trial verdict. And, you know, I woke up early that morning, having given heads up that the verdict was probably coming in that day. And, you know, immediately, you know, my CEO reached out, Katie Kirkpatrick, and she was like, we need to be ready. And I was like, okay, I'm be ready. I prepared a statement for everything. One if guilty, one if not guilty, one if not guilty on lesser charges. Needed to do internal communications email. Like I was a writing fool that morning. And interestingly, you know, my CEO, and I think she'd be okay with me sharing this, is that, you know, she came to me and she said, you know, we need to make sure that we're brief and we're balanced. And I think for the very first time as a Black woman in this profession, it, for me, drew a very hard line. And I have to give credit to her because I've entered into a conversation with her first asking for psychological safety because I was about to say some things. And I needed to make sure that there was going to be no retaliation or issue that came from it. And she was like, of course not. You know, I love it. Push back, tell me what I need to hear. And I love that about her. It's part of the thing that has made it so great about joining in this role. And I'm thankful to Disha for, you know, kicking that door open and making it a little bit easier for me. But in that, I shared that, you know, where is the balance in our justice system? Where is the balance in the fact that this man was hunted down at all? Where is the balance in the fact that we are waiting on the verdict for a trial for his murder, which most of us believe is going to come back as not guilty because there are 11 white jurors and 1 Black juror? Where is the balance in this at all? This is a time to demonstrate our values. This is a time to demonstrate our purpose. And when you demonstrate your values, when you demonstrate your purpose, you are always going to arrive on the right side of the history, but wrong side of somebody's feelings. Yep. And pardon my French, but your feelings. You get a chance to wake up tomorrow with your family and your sons and your husbands, and Ahmaud Arbery's mother does not. Today is not a moment to be brief. It is not a moment to be balanced. It is to call it what it is, to speak power to truth, and to make sure that we are honoring his life and the family and friends and all of us that remain, that grieve this systemic issue that we are dealing with. And I made it very clear that like this, we are going to get this right. We're not going to get it comfortable. We're not going to get it balanced. We're going to get it right. We're either going to say something or say nothing, because we won't at all dishonor, like the idea of his mother, like I could not get her face out of my head. And the responsibility that I carry as a Black woman to make sure that we are not appropriating her son's death. That was extremely critical to me. And so I had a draw the line moment. And I say, I am thankful for my CEO because she listened to me and she said, fair point. You know what? That's my privilege. I was not, okay, all right, write it the way that it needs to be written. Now we tussle back and forth. We finally got there, you know, But at the end of the day, I am proud of the fact that, one, I was given that space of honor to actually speak on behalf of what should be said. And that I was given the psychological safety by my CEO to actually be a Black woman with, yes, cultural lived experience and also professional experience to be able to address what we should do. And in the end, we got there, and it was like, well, maybe we should do it tomorrow or day after tomorrow. And I was like, no, today. I tweeted out the other day, for all comms professionals out there, you are not CNN. You don't have to be first. You need to be timely. You need to get it right. But you don't have to be first. Just make sure you get it right. Make sure you're timely. And I feel like that's what we did. So I'm proud of where we landed in the end. And I think that, it was a moment to feel and find my voice. I don't know that I would have advocated that hard in another situation, but I think for me, it was important that this was one of those hills that I was going to pick. It was a hill that I was going to pick to die on. If that meant Monday morning came and they were seeking a new CBCO, then so be it. But I was not going to dishonor the life and memory of Ahmaud or his mother and his family. Like, it just needed to be right.
Absolutely. I have many of those stories with wonderful clients. And sometimes it makes you question your personal values and saying, hey, will I be able to actually get rest tonight if I okay this decision? So I applaud you for standing in the gap, both you and Daphne. Daphne, I know reading that mail, girl, is not fun. I actually laughed inside when you shared it, so we'll have to talk offline. But my final question before we go into Q&A, and this is actually from one of the Q&A box. As we approach Black History Month, right? So we know some organizations attach their DE&I initiatives to this and similar observances, Pride Month. We almost call it checking the box as they go from one group to another group throughout the year. Can you all speak to the consequences of this approach? Do you think that it's enough? What is your thought on that?
Yeah, 100%. This is the stuff like Dwayna is in such a powerful position because she's able to use her voice to create change, not just for her organization and whoever comes after her, but also for the other companies that she works with. They take, they'll see the strong leadership that she has within the organization and that the chamber has. And hopefully that some of that spreads to those of us who are part of the chamber. But I will say that when you're in organizations like a Coca-Cola company, it's very easy for people to be like, yep, Black History Month, where's the Blacks? And there's a one Black piece of creative, and we're gonna roll that on out, and that's our Black History Month. And then the Black Employee Network called BEN, they're gonna do like their own thing, and there you go. And Hispanic History Month is, also gonna be something, and we'll roll out our president, and that'll be good. And people will feel good about it, and they'll be like high-fiving each other. And we have like a Hispanic creative, like some people enjoying a Coca-Cola and they're smiling in front of some tacos, and then there you go. And what I say to people all the time is, it's like being Black is 365. Being Hispanic is 365, 24/7. And so let's honor that. So it's not just limited to the month in which we acknowledge these cultures and these races. And so again, this is creating inclusive in work environments, but also inclusive marketing, that we look, diverse at all times, not just limited to February for Black folks. I want to see Black people all year round. Sprite might be different because they Black literally 24/7, 365. But, I really want to impress upon everyone that the work has to be done. It starts with the people, for us to question, for us to literally say, and that doesn't work. I will tell you, when I first joined, I was somehow I had to do some ad for a Hispanic trade publication. And it took me the longest time. I was like, who owns this? Like, I'm not sure it's me. And everybody was like, no, well, there's some Hispanic creative. I search high and low. And I'm like, why is it taking me this long? And then finally, I just went to the CMO. I'm like, listen, I don't even know if you know this, but like, I tried to find an ad with some Hispanic people in it that wasn't, off tone, and couldn't. And she was like, what do you mean? And I explained it and I showed her what it had. She was like, this is unacceptable. And I was like, well, there you go. Right. And so some of it is just raising the issue, calling people on their stuff. It is uncomfortable. It's the same uncomfortable work, just looks a little different in an organization like mine. And you have to know who to talk to and how to talk to them, right? Because you got to be goal oriented. Your goal is not to be like, I told you, and really aggressive. Your goal is to make change. So if you went from 1 to get to 5, and if you went to 5, you get it, as an alternative for every single creative. They have diversity in everything that we do. Now, we do have some diversity in everything we do, but like, again, as a global organization that's focused on finances, they look for sometimes the easiest way, right, to present creative. Is a white person who looks like white Hispanic versus white Caucasian, like this is what they do. And I'm just being very honest. And so you have to be like, guys, this isn't okay. But your voice, this is where your voice comes in. This is why the people matter. This is why you have to do the data, do the work, and stand by what you need to stand by. And if something doesn't feel comfortable, Dwayna just said it, you have to be willing, you have to pick your battles, but you got to be willing sometimes to lay it on the line.
Absolutely. So final question, really quick before we run out of time. What is one piece of advice that you will give someone on how brands or how they can keep their DE&I efforts from being diluted for the sake of balance?
To keep the brand from the DE&I efforts from being diluted?
Yes.
Honestly, y'all, like, I don't know if there's a way for that. You have to stand in truth. You have to make sure that you're calling out the things that don't make sense, that put the brand in that puts the brand in harm for crisis and reputation issues, that diminishes your internal culture. A lot of times, this stuff is, no pun intended, but black and white issues. A lot of times it's a right and wrong kind of thing. But yes, like the world that Daphne's in many of our worlds, it is financial driven, right? So it sometimes comes down to that business decision that doesn't feel good from a culture or D&I discipline perspective. But at the end of the day, diluting, progress, those things, they're subjective terms. Determine what that is to you. Determine where that line is for you, for your organization, and make sure that you have that buy-in so that you can always be doing the litmus as to whether or not we're meeting the mark or we're exceeding the mark, or whether or not we're failing ourselves. But that's going to be subjective to what type of organization you're in, the global footprint of that organization, because the issues of the US, we like to think that our issues reign supreme, but when you go over into third world countries and you're dealing with women's issues and race issues and poverty issues and, like, it's a completely different atmosphere. DE&I looks completely different when you bring in the world stage to that. So I would just say, set the bar, get the internal buy-in for that, define what diluting is, and make sure that you are always meeting the mark or exceeding the mark for your organization and also for your personal values.
Awesome. Daphne, anything to add as we close out?
No, I echo what Dwayna says. I mean, very subjective, but also somewhat depending upon what organization you work in, like, you also have to be realistic. And I know it's hard to say, I really, really do, but all of us are going to be stretched and pressure test. And we all have to make decisions because the truth of the matter is you are going to take some giant steps forward, but also you're going to slide back depending upon who's in leadership, depending upon the economic drivers, how your business is doing. There's so many things. We all know when rubber hits the road, like when they start like cutting budgets, what comes first?
What's cultural?
Yep. So, I mean, just keep in mind that that's the battle that we all are facing. No one is unique in this one. We're all in that struggle, but we're in it together. So power with numbers, right? Talk about it, talk to people, continue the conversation and continue pushing forward.
Awesome. Well, I thank you both for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Noelle.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, Roy. Everyone, drop some love for our panelists and moderator in the chat. I know I've already seen some go Spellman, go Dwayna. So drop some love for our panelists. And thank you all so much again. Thank you, Roy, for leading this important conversation. I know I've learned a lot, and everyone who has been on this call has as well. Just for everyone, all of our attendees, thank you all for joining. Please look out for this recording post-event. You should hopefully have it at some point today. And then there'll also be a post-event survey. We want to hear from you. We want to hear how much value you found in this conversation and really be able to have additional conversations like this in the future. So thank you so much again, everyone, for joining, and hope you have a wonderful end of your week. Thank you, guys.